They laughed when I brought a +1 to the family reunion. Then the governor walked in. My name is Clara Bennett. I am 31 years old. It started with a joke. My cousin Jake waved his beer in the air, his face red from the sun. Clara brought a +1? He yelled across the backyard. What is it this year? Imaginary boyfriend or emotional support cat? Everyone laughed. The whole loud, messy, judgmental Bennett clan. I laughed too. It was a reflex, a thin, papery smile. I pretended it didn't sting. I pretended I wasn't burning with shame from my toes to my scalp. They had no idea. They all thought I was a joke. The lonely spinster, the sad sack teacher, they had no idea that my +1 wasn't imaginary. He was Governor Ethan Ross, and he was on his way. Every family has its pecking order. A ladder. In the Bennett clan, you were either climbing or you were a rug for everyone else to wipe their feet on. For 31 years, I had been the rug. Success in my family was not quiet. It was loud. It was measured in things you could post on social media. LinkedIn updates about a promotion. Sonogram photos. Engagement rings so big they looked like costume jewelry. Holiday cards mailed from expensive sandy beaches. My older sister Leah had it all. She was the golden child. She was a partner at a big law firm in Chicago. She had a surgeon husband named Mark, who was handsome and boring and rich. They had a perfect baby, a son named Oliver, who of course never cried. Leah was not mean, not really. That's what made it worse. She was worse than mean. She was pitying. At Christmas, she would pull me aside, her eyes soft with concern. Clara, honey, she'd whisper, clutching my hand. I heard about that old apartment building of yours. Are you okay? Mark and I were worried. We could co-sign a lease on something safer. She made it sound like I was living in a cardboard box. I lived in a perfectly nice one-bedroom apartment. I'm fine, Leah. I like my apartment. And before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? I know, she'd say, patting my hand. You're so independent. It's brave. Brave. That was the word they used when they meant failing. And then there was me. I had a classroom full of hormonal high school sophomores. I had a 2014 Toyota Corolla with a dent in the passenger door. I had a cat named Fitzgerald. To the Bennetts, this was not a life. It was a waiting room. At every reunion, every Thanksgiving, every baptism, I was the running joke. I was Clara, the career woman who will figure out love eventually. My cousins were the worst. Jake especially. Jake had peaked in high school as the starting quarterback, and now, at 33, he sold medical supplies and still lived like he was in a fraternity. He was loud, he was crude, and for some reason he had decided I was his personal punching bag. It wasn't always this bad. When I was younger, I tried to fight back. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 25. I was in graduate school, getting my master's in education. I was excited. I was telling my dad about my thesis. Jake interrupted me. That's cool, Clara, but you know what they say, right? Those who can't do. Those who can't do, teach. The table snickered. That's not funny, Jake, I said, my voice shaking. I'm working hard. I love what I do. Relax, he'd boomed, slapping the table. It's a joke. God, Clara, you're so sensitive. This is why you're single. I looked at my mom. She just gave me a tight, helpless smile. Don't make a scene, Clara. I looked at my dad. He was studying the gravy boat like it held the secrets to the universe. No one backed me up. No one ever backed me up, so I learned to stop trying. I learned to stop explaining myself. I learned to swallow the ache. I would show up to these events with a bright, fake smile. I would bring the good potato salad. I would volunteer to wash the dishes, just to have a few minutes alone in the kitchen, my hands in hot water, my back to the laughter. I would listen to Leah talk about her trip to Italy. I would listen to Jake brag about his sales bonus. I would listen to Aunt Joanne, the matriarch of this whole circus, ask me when I was going to settle down. You're not getting any younger. Clara, she'd say, staring at my stomach, as if checking for a baby. Your eggs aren't made of stone, you know. I'm happy, Aunt Joanne, I would reply. Oh, happy, she'd sniff, as if I'd said a dirty word. Happiness doesn't pay for your retirement. A husband does. This was my family. This was the group of people I was driving to see. The dread started in my stomach the night before. By the time I was parking my Toyota behind a row of brand new BMWs and Audis, my heart was a cold, hard knot. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, the engine off, listening to the distant sound of their laughter over the fence. I checked my phone. One new text, from Ethan, on my way. Security is being difficult as usual. Can't wait to see you. I love you, I closed my eyes. I love you. He wrote that. He said it all the time, but it felt unreal. His world was so different from this one. To Ethan, I love you too. Drive safe and prepare yourself. There, a lot from Ethan. I can handle a few politicians. How much harder can your family be? I let out a small, bitter laugh. He had no idea. I got out of the car, grabbed the store-bought dessert I hadn't had time to bake, and walked toward the gate. I pasted on the smile. I swallowed the ache. I prepared to be the rug. I had been dating Ethan Ross for 8 months. 8 months of a quiet, secret, parallel life. We met at a state literacy fundraiser. It was the most boring night of my life. I was only there because my school principal had forced me to go, handing me a free ticket. Represent the school, Clara. Mingle. I was terrible at mingling. I was standing near a platter of dry-looking mini quiches, trying to look engaged when a man turned around too quickly. He was holding a cup of coffee. Black. It went all over my new white silk blouse. "Oh, God," he said. He didn't just look startled. He looked horrified. He grabbed a pile of napkins. "I am so sorry. I'm a klutz. I'm a complete idiot. Here," he started dabbing at my shirt, which was, of course, making it worse. "It's okay," I said, trying to stop him. "It's fine, really. It's just a shirt." "It's not fine," he said, his eyes meeting mine. They were deep blue and incredibly tired. "That's a beautiful blouse, and I just ruined it." He paused, looking at me. "I'm Ethan. Clara," I said. My shirt was soaking wet and transparent. I felt like a fool. "Clara." He said my name like it mattered. "Listen, I have to go up and speak. I'm the keynote, God help them. But I am not letting this go. Give me your phone." I was so flustered, I just handed it to him. He typed in his number. "I'm putting my name in as Ethan the Klutz. Text me tomorrow. I am buying you a new shirt." "I'm not kidding." "You don't have to." "I do," he said. "Please. It was a pleasure to meet you, Clara, and to stain you." He smiled, a real, full-wattage smile that lit up his tired eyes. Then someone from the stage called his name. "And now, please welcome Governor Ethan Ross." My jaw dropped. I watched as Ethan the Klutz walked onto the stage, straightened his tie, and suddenly became the most powerful man in the state. I thought that was it. A funny, embarrassing story. But the next morning, I texted him on a dare. "Hi, Ethan the Klutz. This is Clara the Stain. My shirt didn't survive the night." He texted back in 30 seconds. "I'm devastated. Dinner tonight? We must hold a memorial service for the shirt, and I will replace it. I am a man of my word." I didn't believe it. I went to a small, hole-in-the-wall Italian place he'd suggested, way out in the suburbs. I walked in, expecting to be stood up. He was there, sitting in a back booth. No suit, no security. Just a man in a gray Henley. We talked for 4 hours. He wasn't the governor. He was just Ethan. He was divorced, lonely, and funny. He was too smart for his own good. He hated the political game. He loved old books. He asked me about teaching, and he actually listened to the answer. He didn't check his phone once. "You're the most real person I've talked to in 5 years, he said, holding my hand over the checkered tablecloth. I thought he was just saying it. But we had dinner again. And again. For 8 months, we built a life in the shadows. His re-election campaign was in full swing, and he was determined to keep his personal life private. "It's not fair to you," he'd said. "The moment we go public, they'll tear you apart. They'll dig into your high school grades. They'll interview your ex-boyfriends. I don't want to put you through that." So we kept it a secret. It was surprisingly easy. He was the governor. People assumed he was busy. I was a high school teacher. People assumed I was boring. We had our public spots, the Italian place, a small bookshop in a town an hour away. We had our private spots, my small apartment where he'd show up at 10 p.m., exhausted, with takeout. He'd sit on my secondhand sofa, Fitzgerald the cat purring on his lap, and he would just breathe. "You're my sanctuary, Clara," he'd murmur, his head in my lap. It was wonderful. It was also incredibly lonely. I had the most amazing man in the world in love with me, and I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell Leah when she tried to set me up with Mark's really nice, and incredibly weird, anesthesiologist friend. I couldn't tell Aunt Joanne when she sent me a link to a senior dating over 30 website. I couldn't tell my mother when she called me, crying after another relative had expressed concern about my life. Are you happy, Clara? Just tell me you're happy. I am happy, Mom. I really am. Then why are you alone? I was bursting with this secret. It was a beautiful, heavy balloon inside my chest. Then, the annual Bennett family reunion came up. You should come, I told him one night, joking. Meet the whole circus. They'd love you. You're divorced, you're a politician. You're basically their two least favorite things. He didn't laugh. He just looked at me. When is it? July 15th. Why? He pulled out his phone and spoke to his chief of staff on text. Clear my schedule on the 15th. The whole day. It's personal. He looked up at me. What time should I be there? Ethan, no. You can't. It's them. It's the family I told you about. The ones who call me Brave Clara. I know, he said, taking my hands. The campaign is almost over. We're going to win. And I am tired of hiding you. I am proud of you. I want to show you off. I want to meet the people who made you. They didn't make me, Ethan. I survived them. Then I want to meet the people you survived, he said, his eyes serious. I want to be your +1. My heart swelled. For the first time, I felt a spark of not just hope, but power. What would the looks on their faces be? What would Jake say? Okay, I whispered. Okay, be there around 3 p.m. and brace yourself, sweetheart, he'd said, kissing my forehead. I'm the one bringing the Secret Service. I think they should brace themselves. But now, walking into the backyard, my cheap dessert in hand, that confidence felt a million miles away. I was just Clara, and this was just another day to be the rug. The reunion was already in full swing. It was a hot, sticky Illinois day. The smell of cheap beer and lighter fluid hung in the air. My Uncle Bill was at the grill burning hot dogs. I walked in. Clara's here. Aunt Joanne shrieked, as if she were announcing a natural disaster. She was already on her third glass of white wine, and it was only 1 p.m. Hi, Aunt Joanne. Hi, Uncle Bill. Put your whatever that is on the table, honey, she said, eyeing my dessert. Leah made her famous 7-layer dip. From scratch. Of course she did. I put my dessert down next to 3 other potato salads and looked for a friendly face. There were none. Just a sea of Bennetts and their spouses and their perfect children. I grabbed a bottle of water and tried to find a quiet corner. It lasted about 10 minutes. Clara. Over here. It was Leah. She was waving from a picnic table. She was sitting with her perfect husband, Mark, and my cousin Jake, and his new 22-year-old girlfriend, who looked like she'd been 3D printed. I was trapped. I walked over. Hi, Leah. Hi, Mark. Jake. Clara, Jake said, giving me a sloppy grin. Looking good. Still teaching kids how to read old books? Still in medical sales, Jake? I replied, trying to keep my voice light. He just made President's Club, the new girlfriend chirped. We're going to Maui. That's nice, I said. Leah, sensing the tension, jumped in with her pity smile. Clara, we were so glad you could make it. Mom said you were bringing someone? The table went quiet. Jake's eyes lit up. This was the blood in the water. Oh, yeah, Jake said, leaning forward. Mom said Clara has a boyfriend. A secret boyfriend. Who is he, Clara? Is he shy? Does he live in Canada? I felt the heat rise in my neck. He's just running late, I said, my voice tight. Oh, sure. Running late. Jake winked at Mark. That's what I used to tell girls in college, too. He's real, Jake, I said. Uh-huh. Jake took a big swig of his beer. So, what's his name? Or is he like Voldemort? He who must not be named? His name is Ethan, I said quietly. Jake burst out laughing. A loud, barking laugh that made half the yard turn and look. Ethan? Ooh, classy. Ethan? What's he do? Is he a poet? A gender studies professor? Leave her alone, Jake, Leah said, but she was smiling. She loved this. The perfect, successful sister defending the poor, lonely one. I'm just curious, Jake said, holding his hands up. We're all family. We just want to know who's dating our Clara. She's so particular. I'm not particular, I said. Sure you are. Remember Mark? The banker? You dumped him because he clipped his coupons. I dumped him because he was a controlling jerk who read my texts, I said. Details. Details. Jake waved his hand. He was rich. So, this new guy, Aunt Joanne said, appearing behind me like a vulture. Ethan, does he have a last name? I hesitated. I didn't want to say it. I just wanted Ethan to show up. I wanted him to walk in and for all this to stop. I checked my phone. 2:45 p.m. No new texts, my stomach twisted. What if he didn't come? What if there was an emergency? What if he'd changed his mind? What if he'd realized that I and my loud, awful family were not worth the trouble? The self-doubt was a physical sickness. They were right. I was a joke. I was the sad, lonely spinster making up a fantasy boyfriend. Clara? You still with us? Jake was snapping his fingers in my face. What does Ethan do? Come on. We're all dying to know. I was so tired. So defeated. I felt the tears building behind my eyes, and I hated myself for it. I would not cry. Not here. So, in a low, flat voice, I said the only thing I had left. He's a governor. The table went silent. It was one perfect, beautiful beat of silence. Then Jake howled. He didn't just laugh. He howled, slapping his knee. A governor! He shouted, making sure the entire party could hear. She did it! She finally topped herself. Mark was choking on his beer, trying to hide his laughter. Leah had her hand over her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Oh, honey, Aunt Joanne said, and her voice was a knife of pure pity. Oh, Clara, sweetie, you don't have to make things up. I'm not making it up, I said, and I hated the way my voice cracked. Of course he is. Jake was still yelling. Governor of what, Clara? Narnia? The great state of imagination land? He's the governor of Illinois, Jake, you idiot, I snapped. This just made them laugh harder. It was a tidal wave of mockery. They were feeding on my humiliation. That's sad, Jake's girlfriend whispered to him, loud enough for me to hear. That's just really sad, I stood up. My chair scraped on the patio. I was done. I was leaving. I would get in my car, and I would drive, and I would never, ever come back. I would change my name. I would move to Oregon. I have to go, I whispered, my vision blurring. Aw, Clara, don't go, Jake called. The governor might show up. We have to roll out the red carpet. I turned to walk away, and that's when I heard it. It wasn't a sound I recognized. Not at a family BBQ. It was the slow, heavy crunch of tires on the gravel of the long driveway. Not a minivan. Not a sedan. It sounded like a bus. Then I heard a man's voice, low and professional. Hold here. I'll sweep the yard. What the hell is that? Uncle Bill said from the grill, spatula in hand. The music, a bad classic rock playlist Jake had made, was still playing. But all the conversation had died. Every head turned toward the side gate. It swung open. A man I had never seen before stepped in. He was wearing a dark suit, a white shirt, and a dark tie. In July. He also had an earpiece and sunglasses. He scanned the yard. He looked at Uncle Bill. He looked at Jake. He looked at the screaming kids by the sprinkler. His eyes were cold, blank, and professional. He was followed by a second man, identical to the first. My family froze. This was not part of the reunion. Jake's smirk was gone, replaced by a confused frown. Who the hell are they? The party poopers? The first man's eyes found me. He'd seen my picture. He knew who I was. He gave me a single short nod. Ms. Bennett? My family heard it. I saw Aunt Joanne's head whip toward me. Ms. Bennett? The man spoke into his wrist. Package is secure. Yard is clear. Bring him in. A third man in a suit walked in, but he was flanking someone else. And then he appeared. Ethan Ross. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans, polished brown boots, and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. No tie. His hair was catching the sun. He looked tired, handsome, and completely out of place. He smiled that calm, composed, camera-ready smile. The one that had melted half the Midwest. The one I saw on the nightly news. The backyard didn't just get quiet. It went into a vacuum. The only sound was the tiss of the sprinkler. Sorry I'm late, Ethan said, his voice carrying easily across the yard. He walked straight toward me. He didn't look at my mother. He didn't look at my sister. He walked past Jake like he wasn't even there. His eyes were locked on mine. Traffic was rough, he said, stopping right in front of me. And the Secret Service insisted on a security sweep. The silence shattered. I heard, very distinctly, a crash. My mother had dropped the entire glass pitcher of lemonade. It exploded on the patio stones. I heard another sound, a clank and a fizz. Jake's beer had slipped right out of his hand. It hit the grass, fizzing quietly at his feet. His mouth was hanging wide open. Aunt Joanne looked like she had seen a ghost. Leah's face was a perfect, priceless mask of pure, unadulterated shock. This was the man they saw on TV. This was the man on billboards. This was the man who interrupted their soap operas with state emergency broadcasts, and he was in their backyard. He was here. He was real. Ethan's eyes found mine. In that 1 second, the entire backyard, the smoking grill, the broken lemonade glass, the 30 stunned faces, all of it dissolved. There was only him. He didn't see poor Clara. He didn't see brave Clara. He didn't see the woman who brings store-bought dessert and gets mocked for her car. He just saw me. The me I was in my apartment at 10 p.m., the me he talked to on the phone, the me he said was his sanctuary. He smiled, a small, private smile that was just for me. And all the shame, all the burning humiliation from Jake, all the years of feeling less than, it all just stopped. It was like turning off a loud, horrible radio. He took the last 2 steps. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't wave. He took my hand. His was so warm. Mine was ice cold and shaking. He wrapped his fingers around mine. A solid, grounding pressure. Then, in front of my entire family, in front of the Secret Service, in front of God and Aunt Joanne, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. It was not a formal, political kiss. It was soft. It was familiar. It was the kiss of a man who has done this 1,000 times. A man who knows the exact spot on my skin that makes me feel safe. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear so only I could hear. "You look beautiful," I heard gasps, actual, audible gasps. I'm pretty sure one of them came from my sister. "Leah," I let out a breath I had been holding for, possibly my entire life. Ethan finally, slowly, turned his gaze away from me and to the crowd of frozen Bennetts. He was still holding my hand. He didn't just hold it. He laced his fingers through mine, a gesture so public, so possessive, so final, that it sent a clear message. "She is with me. Everyone," Ethan said, his voice that perfect, practiced baritone. It was the voice that calmed cities during a storm, the voice that signed bills into law. It was not loud, but it commanded the entire yard. "Thank you for hosting," he said, as if this were a normal Tuesday. "Clara's been telling me about these reunions for months. I'm thrilled to finally meet the people who raised the most extraordinary woman I know." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother, who was still staring at the puddle of lemonade and broken glass at her feet, slowly looked up. Her face was white. My father, who hadn't said more than hello to me, was gripping the back of his lawn chair, his knuckles white. Leah and Mark were a statue of disbelief. Mark, the successful surgeon, just looked like a suburban dad in a polo shirt, suddenly small and insignificant. Leah's perfect 7-layer dip smile was gone. She was just staring. She looked pale, almost sick. And Jake. Oh, Jake. His face had gone from bright red to a pale, blotchy white. The beer fizzed and died at his feet. His mouth was open. He looked like a fish. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. A small "guh" sound escaped. It was Aunt Joanne who finally found her voice. It was a high-pitched, strangled whisper. "Governor Ross?" she breathed, clutching her wine glass to her chest. "The Governor Ross?" Ethan gave her his full 100-watt campaign poster smile. It was devastating. "The same," he said, his voice full of warmth. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Though I'm strictly off duty today. Today I'm just Clara's boyfriend." He said it so simply. Just Clara's boyfriend. But what my family heard was, "The most important title I have today is my relationship with her." Aunt Joanne's mouth fell open. The wine glass she was holding tilted, and red wine splashed onto her white shirt-covered chest. She didn't even notice. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God," the spell was broken. Suddenly, the yard exploded into a flurry of frantic, whispered motion. It wasn't loud. It was terrified. "It's him," I heard my cousin Sarah whisper. "It's really him. Did you know?" Uncle Bill hissed at my father. My dad just shook his head, looking completely lost. The 2 Secret Service agents had taken up positions by the gate. They were invisible, and yet they were the only thing anyone could see besides Ethan. They were a wall of "this is not your world." Ethan, oblivious or more likely completely used to this kind of reaction, just kept smiling, holding my hand. He was an island of calm in the ocean of my family's chaos. "Clara," my mother finally said, taking a dazed step forward. She had glass on her sandals. "Clara, you didn't tell us." Her voice was an accusation. Not, "Why did you hide this?" but "How could you let us behave this way? How could you let me drop my lemonade?" I didn't know what to say. Ethan answered for me. He was smooth. He was perfect. "That's my fault," he said, stepping slightly in front of me, a subtle, protective shield. "Ma'am?" he said to my mother, and her eyes went wide. "My re-election campaign has been intense. I insisted we keep our relationship private." He looked at me, a look of pure public adoration. I didn't want the press to bother her. Clara is the most important thing in my life, and I wanted to protect her from the circus. The circus. He meant his world, but my family heard it differently. They heard I wanted to protect her from you. Jake finally moved. He bent down, picked up his empty beer can, and crushed it in his fist. A bizarre, pathetic display of masculinity. He looked at Ethan. He looked at me. He looked at the two massive men by the gate. He didn't say a word. He just turned, walked to the beer cooler, and got another one. But his swagger was gone. He looked small. "Well," Aunt Joanne said, finally dabbing at her wine-stained shirt. "Well, goodness, we need to get you a chair. Bill, get the governor a chair." "Not that one of the good ones from the house." "Please don't," Ethan said, laughing. "Don't go to any trouble. I'm fine just standing." "Nonsense," my mother said, suddenly snapping into host mode. It was a frantic, terrified energy. "Leah, Mark, go get the good appetizers. The ones we were saving." Leah and Mark just stared at her, then at Ethan, and then, like robots, turned and walked stiffly toward the house. They looked like they were walking to their own execution. This was the moment. The power in my family had, for my entire life, been held by Aunt Joanne's judgment, by Leah's success, by Jake's volume. In 30 seconds, Ethan Ross had taken all of it. He hadn't asked. He hadn't fought for it. He just was. By holding my hand, by calling me sweetheart, by saying he was just Clara's boyfriend, he had redrawn the entire map of the Bennett family. And on this new map, I wasn't the rug. I was the center. I felt his thumb gently rubbing the back of my hand. I looked up at him. He winked at me. Just a quick, tiny wink. "See? I told you I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I wanted to build a house in this single moment and live in it forever. But it wasn't over, because my Uncle Bill, the one who was burning the hot dogs, finally found his voice. And he was the one person who wasn't impressed. Uncle Bill was a man who believed in two things: American-made cars, and that he was the smartest person in any room he was in. He was a skeptic. He was a contrarian. He hated politicians more than he hated foreign beer. He walked away from the grill, wiping his greasy hands on a dish towel that was tucked into his world's best griller apron. He squinted at Ethan. He looked at the security detail. He looked at me. "No offense, sir," he said, and the way he said "sir" made it sound like an insult. "But I gotta ask." The yard, which had just started to buzz with low, panicked whispers, went silent again. "Please," Ethan said, turning to him. He dropped my hand, but only to put his arm around my waist, pulling me against his side. It was an anchor. Uncle Bill gestured at me with the greasy dish towel. "What's a man like you, a governor, all this?" He waved at the security. "Doing with our Clara?" My stomach dropped. I felt sick. "Dad, don't," my cousin Sarah whispered, mortified. "No, I'm serious," Bill said, his voice getting louder. "She's a good kid, but she teaches high school English." There it was. There was the unspoken truth of my entire life. Our Clara, the one we pity, the one who isn't successful, the one who is just a teacher. She teaches high school English. It was my entire life's work, my passion, my calling, reduced to a punchline, reduced to a disqualifier. It was the thing that made me, in their eyes, unworthy. Jake was watching from the cooler, a nasty, hopeful smirk returning to his face. "Yeah," the smirk said. "Explain that, Mr. Bigshot. You're slumming it, and we all know it." Leah and Mark had reappeared on the deck, a platter of shrimp in their hands. They stopped, frozen, listening. This was the trial. This was the moment it would all fall apart. They were waiting for Ethan to be embarrassed, to hedge, to make a polite, political non-answer that would prove they were right all along. I couldn't breathe. I could feel the heat from Ethan's body. I wanted to disappear. I wanted him to let me go. I wanted to run. I felt him tense. But he didn't get angry. He didn't look offended. He just looked sad. He looked at Uncle Bill. Then he looked around the yard, at all the expectant, judgmental faces. Then he looked down at me, and his expression, the look in his eyes, was one of such profound, tender love that it took my breath away. He turned his full attention back to Uncle Bill. "Then she's the most important person in the world," he said simply. Uncle Bill blinked. "What?" "You said she teaches high school English," Ethan said, his voice calm, but now it had steel in it. It was the voice that shut down hecklers. "That doesn't make her less, Bill. That makes her everything." He took his arm from my waist, but only to take both of my hands in his, forcing me to face him. He was talking to Uncle Bill, but he was looking at me. "Do you know what I do all day?" he said, his voice filling the yard. "I argue about budgets. I sit in rooms with men who use $10 words to say absolutely nothing. I shake hands. I smile for cameras. I fight over paragraphs in a bill." He let out a short, tired laugh. "Most days it's a soul-crushing, empty performance. Most days I wonder if any of it even matters." He turned back to the crowd. "But she," he said, and he squeezed my hands. "She teaches kids to think. In a world that wants them to just scroll, she teaches them to close their phones and open a book. She teaches them to find their own voice, to dream, to speak up, to be better." My eyes were filling with tears. I was shaking. "The future that I claim I'm fighting for every day," Ethan went on, his voice rising with a passion I had only ever seen on a debate stage. "She's the one actually building it. She's in the trenches. She's doing the work." He looked at Jake. He looked at Leah. He looked at Aunt Joanne. "You all measure success in, what, job titles? Bank accounts? The car you drive?" He shook his head, a look of genuine pity on his face. He pitied them. "Clara reminds me what's real. When I am so tired of the noise and the lies that I want to quit, I call this woman, and she doesn't care about my poll numbers. She tells me about a sophomore who finally understood a poem. She tells me about a kid who wrote an essay that broke her heart. She grounds me." He looked back at Uncle Bill, who was no longer squinting. His mouth was slightly open. "So you asked me what I'm doing with your Clara," Ethan said, his voice softening. "I'm just trying to be worthy of her. She is more honest, more important, and more real than any single person in my state house, or frankly at this barbecue." The silence that followed was not shock. It was not confusion. It was awe. It was reverence. It was the sound of an entire family, an entire lifetime of judgment, being utterly and completely silenced. Leah's face had crumpled. She wasn't the golden child anymore. She was just a woman on a porch, holding a tray of shrimp, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrible realization. She had been measuring the wrong life. Jake looked deflated. He wasn't the alpha. He wasn't the joke teller. He was just a guy in the grass, his face blotchy, his one-time punching bag now completely, terrifyingly out of his reach. Aunt Joanne was looking at her shoes. She looked ashamed. And my grandmother, my tiny 80-year-old Grandma Bennett, who had been sitting quietly in a chair by the house, who I thought was asleep. She was dabbing at her eyes with a lace-edged napkin. She caught my eye. And she whispered just to me, "Finally, someone with sense." I started to cry. A real, silent, weeping kind of cry. The tears just streamed down my face. Ethan saw them. His face, which had been so strong, just broke. "Oh, sweetheart," he whispered. And that's when he did it. That's when he completely ruined my family and saved my life all in one motion. He turned to me, his voice steady but his eyes bright. "Clara," he said, and the entire yard leaned in. "I was going to wait," he said. "I had a whole plan. I was going to wait until after the campaign. But since we're already surrounded by your favorite people," a jolt went through me. I knew that tone. "Ethan," I hissed, my eyes going wide. "No, not here." "What?" he said, a grin spreading across his face. "No," I whispered frantically. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare." But it was too late. He was already kneeling. He knelt. He didn't just bend his knee. He went all the way down, one knee on the slightly damp grass, right in front of me, right in the middle of my family reunion. The backyard was not just silent anymore. It was like the world had stopped spinning. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. "Ethan!" I whispered, my voice a strangled squeak. My face was on fire. I wanted to sink into the ground. I wanted to vanish. This was not how I had imagined this moment, not with beer-soaked grass and shocked family members and the smell of burnt hot dogs. He ignored my frantic whisper. His eyes, those tired, kind, beautiful blue eyes, were fixed entirely on me. He reached into the pocket of his jeans. My heart started to pound so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. It felt like a drum, deafening in the silence. He pulled out a small, dark velvet box. It was tiny. It was elegant. It felt like a bomb. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a ring. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't enormous. It was a single sparkling diamond, perfectly cut, set simply on a thin gold band. It looked timeless. It looked real. It looked like us. "Clara Bennett," he said, and his voice, usually so steady, had a tremor in it. "I love you more than words can say. I love the way you teach your students to think. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love the way you let me be just Ethan, not the governor when I'm tired and worn out." My vision was blurring. Tears were streaming down my face. My knees felt weak. "I was going to wait," he repeated, his voice softer now, "just for me. I was going to wait for the perfect moment. But standing here with the people who molded you, even if they sometimes forgot how amazing you are," he looked up, a small, hopeful smile on his face. "I can't wait anymore. I don't want to spend another day of my life without planning our future. I don't want to hide you. I want to shout it from the rooftops." He paused, taking a deep breath. His eyes were wide with vulnerability, with hope, with all the love he poured into me every single day. "Clara Bennett, will you marry me?" My breath hitched. The words were simple, direct, so much like him. "Because," he added, a playful glint in his eyes that only I could truly appreciate in that moment. "I've already cleared my schedule for the rest of my life." He was insane. Completely, utterly, wonderfully insane. And he was doing this for me. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for me, here, in front of the very people who had made me doubt my worth my entire life. Aunt Joanne screamed. It wasn't a small scream. It was a full-throated, opera-level shriek of pure, unadulterated shock and delight. "She said yes!" she bellowed, even though I hadn't said a word yet. Jake, who had been standing by the cooler, his mouth still agape, actually dropped his second beer. Again. It landed with a soft thud, and then a louder hiss as it exploded on the grass. He didn't even flinch. He was just staring. My grandmother, bless her heart, clapped her frail hands together. "Finally!" she whispered, a fierce satisfaction in her voice. "Someone with sense." Leah and Mark, still on the deck, looked like they had been hit by lightning. Leah's hand went to her mouth. She didn't look jealous. She looked stunned, like she was seeing something that simply didn't fit into her meticulously organized world. The Secret Service agents, still by the gate, had shifted. I saw one of them, the burly one named Frank, give a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He had known. They all had known. This was why they were there. This was the personal reason. My eyes were still locked on Ethan. He was kneeling, vulnerable, offering me everything. "You're insane," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Tears were still running down my cheeks, but now they were hot, happy tears. "Completely," he said, his smile widening. "But you love me anyway, right?" I laughed. It was a shaky, choked sound, but it was a laugh. "Yes," I said, a sob escaping with the word. "Yes, I do, yes. 1,000 times yes." He let out a whoop. A genuine, ungovernor-like whoop of pure joy. He sprang to his feet, pulling me into his arms. He lifted me off the ground, spinning me around once, twice, my feet dangling. My head was against his chest, and I could hear the frantic, joyful beat of his heart. It matched mine. When he finally set me down, he was still grinning. His eyes were shining. He took the ring from the box. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. He gently took my left hand, his thumb brushing my trembling finger. Then, slowly, carefully, he slipped the diamond ring onto my finger. It was perfect. It fit perfectly. It sparkled, reflecting the setting sun, a tiny, brilliant beacon of hope and love. The moment the ring was on my finger, the backyard erupted. It wasn't just cheers. It was a roar. It was laughter, shouting, crying, applause. It was disbelief, pure, unadulterated, joyful disbelief. Aunt Joanne was clapping so hard I thought her hands might fall off. "My Clara!" she shrieked. "My Clara is marrying the governor!" My mother, now holding a broom and still standing amidst the broken glass, let out a high-pitched, delighted sob. She actually dropped the broom. Jake, for the first time in his life, looked speechless. He looked at the ring, then at Ethan, then back at me. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then just shrugged, a look of utter defeat on his face. He even managed a weak, almost genuine smile. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. Leah was walking toward me now, a strange mixture of awe and something else on her face. Not jealousy, not quite. More like a paradigm shift. Her entire understanding of the universe had just been fundamentally altered. "Clara," she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. She reached out and hugged me. It was a real hug, not a pity hug. It was a hug of genuine, stunned happiness. "Oh, Clara, I'm so happy for you." I hugged her back, tears still streaming. For the first time, it felt like a real connection, not a performance. Then everyone was around us. Hugs, handshakes, questions. "How long? How did you keep it a secret? Is it real?" "Yes, it's real," Ethan said, his arm still around me, beaming. "Every bit of it. The energy in the yard was electric. It was like someone had injected pure joy and astonishment into the air. My family, for the first time, wasn't looking at me with pity or judgment or amusement. They were looking at me with wonder, with respect, and in that moment, for the first time, I felt utterly, completely, truly seen, not as the victim, not as the rug, not as poor Clara, but as Clara, the woman Ethan Ross loved, the woman he wanted to marry, the woman who, apparently, had just broken the entire Bennett family's collective brain. And it felt wonderful. It felt like coming home, but to a home I had never known existed. A home where I was cherished, where I was important, where I was loved. I squeezed Ethan's hand, the cold, brilliant ring sparkling on my finger. This was not just an engagement. This was a revolution. The applause was deafening. It wasn't just clapping. It was a physical wave of sound, a roar of shock and approval that washed over the entire backyard. My family, the people who had been snickering at me 10 minutes ago, were now cheering. They were whistling. They were crying. Aunt Joanne, her wine-stain forgotten, was the loudest. "My Clara!" she was shrieking, clapping her hands so hard they were bright red. "She's marrying the governor! I knew it! I always told your mother that Clara is a special one. I always said it!" It was a lie. A blatant, stunning, ridiculous lie. She had never said that. She had told my mother I needed to lower my standards and try a new hairstyle. I was still wrapped in Ethan's arms, my face buried in his shirt. I was laughing and crying at the same time. The ring felt heavy and solid on my finger, a strange, wonderful weight. "Are you okay?" Ethan whispered, his lips against my hair. "Was this too much?" "I can get us out of here." "No," I whispered back, pulling my head away to look at him. His eyes were so clear, so full of love. "No, it was perfect." He kissed my forehead, long and slow. "Good, because I'm not sure your Aunt Joanne's heart could take any more excitement." The first wave of relatives hit us. It was a stampede. Aunt Joanne was first, naturally. She shoved past my Uncle Bill, her hands outstretched, not toward me, but toward my hand. "Let me see it," she demanded, grabbing my fingers. "Oh, goodness gracious, it's real. Bill, come look at this. It's not one of those fake, cubic things. This is a rock. Oh, Clara, you clever, clever girl. You kept this all to yourself." She was looking at me with a new, terrifying respect. Not as a person, but as a strategist. As if I had successfully executed a brilliant, long-term plan to win a prize. Before I could even answer, my mother was there. Her face was a mess of tears and smudged mascara. She was holding a dustpan, having apparently given up on the broom. "Clara, honey," she sobbed, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lemonade and glass dust. "Oh, my baby. I'm just so happy." She pulled back and looked at Ethan. "Governor, I don't know what to say. We have beer? And the burnt hot dogs? Oh God, Bill, the hot dogs are on fire!" It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Bennet, Ethan said, gently taking the dustpan from her shaking hand and setting it on a table. Please call me Ethan, and I'm fine, really. I'm just happy to be here. My father came next. My quiet, stoic father, who communicated mostly in grunts and by nodding at the TV. He walked right up to Ethan. He didn't say anything for a long, agonizing second. Then, he clapped Ethan on the shoulder. It was a hard, solid, approving clap. Governor, he said, his voice thick. Mr. Bennet, Ethan replied, nodding. Then my father turned to me. He looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in a decade. His eyes were watery. He's a good man, Clara, he said, his voice rough. You did good. I burst into a fresh round of tears. Thanks, Dad. That's when the phones came out. The cheering had died down, replaced by the frenetic, high-pitched buzz of a family trying to process a miracle. And the way my family processed things was to post them. Suddenly, I wasn't a person. I was a photo op. My cousin Sarah, the one who had been whispering about how sad I was suddenly at my side. Clara, oh my God. A selfie, we have to. Before I could say no, her phone was in front of my face, the camera flash blinding me. My cousin, the future First Lady. She shrieked, typing a caption. So happy for her. My phone, which had been silent in my back pocket, began to vibrate. And vibrate. And vibrate. It was a constant, angry buzzing. The news was hitting the extended family group chat. Photos were being sent. My life was, in real time, becoming social media content. I saw Jake. He was still standing by the cooler. He looked sick. He was pale. He had watched his entire world order, the one where he was the alpha and I was the punchline, get vaporized. He saw me looking. He tried to muster a grin. It looked more like a grimace. He started to walk over, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He got within 10 feet of us, where Ethan and I were now surrounded by a circle of fawning, cooing aunts. He stopped, hovering. He was the one on the outside now. He was the one who didn't belong. Ethan, who had the political sixth sense of a hawk, saw him. He gave my hand a squeeze. Excuse us for 1 second, Aunt Joanne. He took my hand and led me, not away from Jake, but toward him. He parted the sea of my family, and we stood directly in front of my cousin. Jake looked like a cornered animal. Hey, he mumbled, looking at the ground. Wow. Congrats, man. Thank you, Ethan said. His voice was polite, but it was cold. It was the voice he used for politicians who had crossed him. Yeah, Jake said, trying a weak, guy laugh. Clara, you sure know how to keep a secret. Jesus, a governor. He shook his head. So I no hard feelings about, earlier? Just family ribbing. You know how it is. He was asking for forgiveness. Not from me, from Ethan. He was trying to get back in. I looked at Ethan. This was his moment. He could have destroyed him. He could have said, I heard what you said and it was disgusting. He could have cut him down. Instead, he just smiled. A tight, political, empty smile. I'm just happy to be here to celebrate with Clara, he said. She's the only thing that matters today. It was a perfect, devastating dismissal. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement of fact. You don't matter. She does. Jake's face fell. He knew he'd been shut down. Yeah, right. Cool. He mumbled something about getting another beer and just walked away. He slunk away, defeated. I had been waiting my whole life for someone to stand up to Jake for me. I just never thought it would be the governor of Illinois in my uncle's backyard after a proposal. I leaned my head on Ethan's shoulder. Thank you, I whispered. I will always have your back, he whispered back. Clara. I turned. It was Leah. She had been standing on the deck this whole time, just watching. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't run over. She had just observed. She walked down the steps, not touching her perfect husband, Mark, who was trailing behind her like a lost puppy. She stopped in front of us. Her face was pale. Her perfect makeup was intact, but her eyes were lost. Leah, I said. She looked at me. She looked at the ring on my finger. She looked at the powerful, handsome man who had his arm around my waist, and I saw it. The thing I had never seen before, the golden child, the one who had everything, was not jealous. She was intimidated. No, not intimidated. She was confused. Her entire life, she had followed the rules. Go to the best school, get the best job. Marry the rich, successful man. Have the perfect baby. She had checked every box. She was the successful one, and I was the failure. But now, in one afternoon, the rules had changed. My failure of a life had produced this. My sad job had been defended as the most important work in the world by a man she saw on the news. My life wasn't the one to be pitied. She looked at her husband, Mark, the successful surgeon. He was just a guy in a polo shirt looking terrified, afraid to even make eye contact with Ethan. Then she looked back at me. Clara, she said, and her voice was small. It's a beautiful ring. Thank you, Leah, I said. She looked at Ethan, then back at me. He really loves you. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. It was her finally understanding what I had been trying to tell them for years. That I was happy. That my life was full. Yes, I said, my voice steady. He does, and I love him. Leah just nodded slowly. She looked like she was going to cry, but not happy tears like Mom. Not angry tears, just sad, confused, existential tears. She had played the game and won, only to find out I was in a completely different and better game all along. She gave me a hug. It was stiff, awkward, and the most real hug she had ever given me. I'm happy for you, she whispered. Really? I know, I said. As she walked away, I felt something shift inside me. The last little bit of hurt, the last little bit of victim, just dissolved. I wasn't poor Clara. I wasn't even Clara, the governor's fiancée. I was just Clara. And for the first time in my life, standing in that chaotic, crazy backyard, I was enough. It was Frank, the lead Secret Service agent, who finally gave us an out. After another 45 minutes of what felt like a royal receiving line, of Aunt Joanne planning my wedding, of my mother trying to wrap up burnt hot dogs for Ethan to take for the road, of Uncle Bill asking him about property taxes, Frank stepped forward. His presence was like a splash of cold water. Sir, Ms. Bennett, he said, his voice polite but non-negotiable. We have a hard stop in 10 minutes. Thank you, Frank, Ethan said, looking relieved. He turned to my mother, who looked like she was about to cry at the thought of him leaving. This was wonderful, Mrs. Bennett. Thank you for having me. The hot dogs were delicious. He was a terrible liar, but my mother beamed anyway. He began the process of extraction. He shook my father's hand again. He kissed my grandmother's head. He waved to the sea of my cousins. He never once let go of my hand. He was a shield, guiding me through the chaos of my own family. I was no longer an individual. I was part of us. We were a unit. We walked toward the side gate, the same gate he had entered. It felt like a lifetime ago. The agents, Frank and the other man, walked in front and behind us, clearing a path that no one in my family dared to cross. We stepped through the gate. The black, imposing SUV was waiting, its engine humming. One of the agents opened the back door. Ethan helped me in, his hand on my back, before sliding in beside me. The heavy thud and click of the door sealing was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It shut out the noise. It shut out the camera flashes from my cousins' phones. It shut out the shrieks of, "Call me!" and "We'll talk about the wedding." Inside, it was quiet. It was just the low, powerful hum of the engine and the smell of clean leather. The windows were so dark. The backyard was just a bright, muffled blur. I leaned my head back against the headrest and just breathed. I let out a sigh that felt like it came from my soul, a sigh that carried 31 years of family baggage with it. I looked down at my left hand, which was resting on my lap. The ring was there. It wasn't a dream. It was sparkling in the low light of the car's interior. We sat in silence as the car pulled away from the curb and started to roll smoothly down the street. After a full minute, Ethan's voice, low and amused, broke the quiet. "So," he said, "I told you we'd shock them." I turned my head to look at him. He was watching me, a small, tired smile on his face. I let out a shaky laugh. "Shock them," I said. "Ethan, you didn't just shock them. You broke their brains. I'm pretty sure you gave Aunt Joanne a religious experience. And Jake looked like he had seen a ghost. He was the one who called you sensitive, right?" Ethan asked, his smile fading a little. "Among other things." "He won't be doing that again," he said, his voice flat. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. I smiled, a real, tired, happy smile. You didn't just shock them, I said, repeating myself. You gave Grandma something to brag about for the next decade. Ethan laughed, a real full laugh that filled the car. He took my hand, the one with the ring, and brought it to his lips, kissing my knuckles. Good, he said, his voice warm, because I plan to keep giving them stories. He laced his fingers through mine, and we sat in comfortable silence as the car merged onto the highway, leaving the suburbs and my family behind us. My phone, which had been in my back pocket, buzzed. I pulled it out and looked at the console. It was buzzing, and buzzing, and buzzing. New messages, Bennett family chat, missed call, Aunt Joanne, new friend request, Jake Bennett, text message, Leah, can we talk? I'm sorry. The old Clara would have been desperate. She would have grabbed the phone, her hands shaking, and read every single message. She would have drunk in the apologies, the shock, the validation. She would have needed it, like a drug, to prove that it had all been real, to prove that she had won. I looked at the buzzing phone. I looked at the man beside me, his eyes closed, his thumb gently rubbing my hand. I looked at the ring on my finger. My hand moved, and I pressed the silent button on the side of the phone. The buzzing stopped. I didn't bother unlocking it. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to read the messages. I didn't need to prove anything. My value wasn't up for debate. It wasn't something they could give me or take away with their jokes or their approval. I was not the victim. I was not the punchline. I was just Clara, and I was loved. I smiled, turning my hand over in his, and stared out the window as the city lights grew closer. They laughed when I said he was real. Now they'll never forget the day he walked in,